Alrighty, hello, everybody. I'm here with Nightbringer. Say hello, Nightbringer.
Goodbye.
That's not how that works. That's not how that works.
I mean,
And
maybe.
we're here to talk about Murder, She Wrote. We both watched the episode. It's either called Pilot or Episode 1. And then apparently most people watch it split into 2, which makes a lot of sense. Although
It's called.
I would hate to follow it split in 2. It's quite difficult to follow just as one long thing.
Yeah.
But we'll get into that.
It's called The Murder of Sherlock Holmes, not Pilot or Episode 1. Thank you.
Well, but yeah, it's either some people consider it the pilot, some people consider it episode 1.
I mean, it was probably filmed as a pilot and shown to
It
execs.
it is definitely a pilot. It feels like a pilot and it runs like a pilot. So it is most definitely a pilot. But before we get into discussion of the episode, I kind of wanted to briefly get into why are we doing this?
I mean, we're doing it partly because you suggested it and partly because it's fucking hilarious. That's actually vulgarity. We probably should have touched on that.
The thing with swearing is if we can keep it to a minimum, but I also know that we both swear quite casually, and I don't really want us to be policing ourselves a huge amount. So if one slips, it slips, but let's just not be effing and blinding all the way to the shops.
Fair.
But I mean, so oh my god, I was going to call her Jessica Fletcher. Angela Lansbury is kind of famous in my group of friends and probably now on stream because of the video where she talks about older female self-love in a bathtub. And because of that, she's always, and I don't want to say a joke, and I don't mean it in a mean way, but she's always kind of been a joke in my friend group. And then Murder, She Wrote was just a show that was always on. They used to play it with, over in the UK here, with Quincy, Columbo, and there was another one they used to show all the time. But, you know, it was Quincy, Columbo, and Murder, She Wrote.
They definitely did a lot of reruns of Murder, She Wrote over here as well, but I think we got some Quincy and almost no Columbo here in the US, comparatively speaking.
Okay, that's interesting. But yeah, so what I've realized having watched the pilot is how much story they tried to shove down right from the start. I don't want to go knocking into the pilot, but I've also think what I realized is that I probably haven't watched many episodes of Murder, She Wrote, but I'm going to assume that when we get to a couple, I will remember them really well.
I mean, with any show like this, they tend to pick which episodes they're going to rerun a million times and screw up so much others.
Yes, and I'm honestly wondering if they ever went as far back as season 1 when they did reruns over here. It'll be interesting to see if I recognize any of the episodes as we go forward. But I would say my exposure to Murder, She Wrote isn't great. So a lot of the stuff that happens will be new to me. What about yourself? Have you watched it before?
I think I've seen snippets at most. I don't think I ever actually saw a full episode. I saw full episodes of Golden Girls, but that's not remotely the same.
It's not remotely the same, no.
It would have also been running on reruns.
Yeah, I mean this episode I believe was from 1984. So I would have been 1 year old when this episode first came out.
Would not have been 1 year old.
So that should, I think, just go to explain, like, this show is old. And okay, let's start talking about the pilot. So I will say that even though it is that old, and it definitely looks like a product of its time, I wouldn't say it's aged particularly poorly.
I would agree. Honestly, I found it surprisingly charming because they definitely play on some tropes and then also kind of ditch those tropes. The opening scene of it actually being a play, I thought it was. My first thought was going to be, oh God, is this obnoxiously campy? It's taking itself too seriously because the opening scene has an actress screaming about who's coming into her house, the wind blowing, all that jazz.
Yeah.
Profoundly cliche, but the way it pivots almost immediately is perfect.
Yes, I liked the Jessica Fletcher introduction.
Yeah.
I will say, I think by the end of that scene, so there's always the fear with these kind of things of how do you make the super brainy detective, and that's what Jessica Fletcher is in these. She's a super brainy detective. How do you make them likable?
Right.
And I will say, by the end of that scene, I was thinking she's not going to be likable at all. She is a busybody and is fairly annoying. The only saving grace from that particular scene with Jessica Fletcher, I think, was the fact that she seemed to be blissfully unaware of it.
Yeah. So she was blissfully unaware, but it was also she had the stereotype of the kind of doddering, over-involved grandmother in what's going. It was what the PTA sale that
It
they
was the
were.
PTA. I think they were making sandwiches for the opening night or something, right? I think that was
Right.
or bake sale or something like that.
And she doesn't take herself too seriously when she discusses who the murderer is. Like
No, and I
she
think
just
this is the same with Grace. So after that opening scene, it then does a very lengthy introduction thing where it goes through what I'm assuming is the full song of Murder She Wrote, which you'll probably never hear again. Because I think it was like 1.5 to 2 minutes of introduction, where she's going for a jog and saying hello to lots of different people.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And they really are trying to introduce this idea that she is, she's old, she's semi-retired. We learned fairly early on that her husband had died not that long ago. In terms of, now, this was all new to me. As someone who had seen Murder She Wrote before, I had no idea that she started not as a world famous author. I had no idea that was a thing. Right. So I had no idea she was meant to be a substitute teacher, and all that kind of stuff. And I would say one of the most rushed bits. So you really can split this pilot into two. Well, three kind of. And like the first 20 to 30 minutes is all setting up who Jessica Fletcher is and
Right.
why she can possibly get involved in what's to come. Right. So she goes from an old woman living in Cabot Cove by herself.
Rural America.
It's the nephew who basically steals the book and shows it to a publisher. And that's
He
kind
shows
of
it to
how.
his girlfriend, and she works with a publisher, and it goes
Yes.
quickly from there.
And it goes incredibly quickly from there. And yeah, I had no idea that they'd ever shown that side of it, the kind of life before. Well, they didn't really show life before she was a famous author, and I think that was kind of the problem. But what I feel that did do is this really upped her humility.
Yeah, exactly. So they don't show much of her life before, but you get a very strong sense of who she is as a person. Also, I just scrubbed through the episode. It looks like the intro music was 2.5 minutes.
Yeah, I mean, and that was way too long. Like,
and
especially from a modern audience, like we don't really
right.
get introductions like that, right?
Mentally, I think I just tuned out during it, but I can imagine if I was actually sitting down watching it on TV, that would have just been excruciatingly long. And they took 2 full minutes before they get to it, and it's 2.5. Like, that's just unbelievable.
But yeah, no, it was. I remember when I was watching watching it, and I was like, when is the music going to stop? When is this actually going to pick up into the episode? But the other side of it is, if you watched it, it does give. That really is all you get about life before her life
Right.
before she gets picked up by the publisher, right? So I think you're meant to imagine that's her day every day, right? She goes for a run. She helps out substitute teaching at the school. She does very little else. She didn't look miserable in it though, which I thought was good. She seemed
Hmm.
happy in her own life, which I liked. And I will also say, so right at the end of the music where you hear the phone ringing and she has to run into the front door to catch the phone, which is on the desk because there's no mobiles at this stage. Um, I was kind of impressed with the comedy and the physicality of her comedy with her little run to get the phone.
Yeah.
It stood out to me. I don't know why, but it stood out to me as there's something a little bit funny and a little bit weird about this woman, right?
So I didn't strike it as weird. It just an awkward, um, not quite.
Let's say
She's uncertain
eccentric.
of herself. Yes, and it's kind of normal eccentric you expect from someone who lives in a very rural location who's busy about their own lives. They're not stressed, they're not fussing, and all of a sudden, a phone call's probably the most interesting portion of her day.
Yeah.
Um, Though it did make a very nice transition between the opening scene and going into the actual show, and it was actually, I think, quite smart to include the phone ringing to bring the audience's attention back to the TV after 2.5 minutes
Yes.
of intro music.
Yeah, I agree. And it also gave a reason for her to suddenly speed up her run to get back into the house, which I thought was
Right.
quite nice. And I thought it all kind of went it just knitted together quite well, right? Um and as an introduction, as kind of so we've now seen the basically the two parts of Jessica Fletcher. She is smart, she can work out puzzles, and she can kind of put clues together. Um Now, what I will say, a little bit of an aside, and I'm going back here. The director takes a huge affront to the fact that somebody has worked out the plot of a mystery play that he's put on,
Yeah,
right?
I think they did well by giving. It, it was only like a minute he was on screen, but it was pure pretentiousness, and I wrote him off as quickly as I was attached to Angela. It was
The
just
thing, the thing I took from it is, and the thing that worried me, and I'll be interested to see how you feel the mystery unfolded, and if you feel it unfolded in a good way that you could follow and possibly jump ahead to try and work it out. But the thing that kind of raised my alarm bells is that they took great affront that somebody could work it out. And really, in a mystery, if you can put the breadcrumbs in that people can work it out before the detective gets there, that's not a bad thing. Um, it's better that your audience is, well, from my experience anyway, and from how I prefer to watch these things, is it's more fun to be able to try and guess and work things out than it is to be led by the hand,
right.
right?
You want the audience to be as inquisitive about the puzzle as your main character is, and if you can find it out along or ahead of her, that's great. You want those nuggets to keep the
Yes,
audience trying to guess themselves.
and again, I won't go into my main point here because we'll do that at the end, kind of how we feel the mystery kind of unfolded. But so then she is whisked away to New York City. It was New York, right? I'm
Yes.
pretty sure it was New York. Yeah. She's whisked away to New York City. Her book basically becomes an overnight sensation. Um, she's suddenly famous, and we're introduced to the publisher himself, who comes across as well the nephew and the girlfriend. But honestly, I kind of found the nephew and the girlfriend kind of
Right
bland.
off. Yeah.
And even though I think they tried to make the nephew very important to the story, I never really felt it. Yes, they give a good reason for why Jessica Fletcher comes back into the mystery to try and solve it, because obviously he gets in trouble himself. But yeah, I didn't really need to see them as often as I did, I guess. Um,
They were important to her development, but not that important in and of themselves.
they were, and I think it'll be intriguing to see as time goes on if they still try to keep this, because in a lot of murder mysteries, like take Sherlock Holmes, you've got Sherlock Holmes and you've got Watson,
Mm,
right? And I feel in a way they were trying to make the nephew the Watson. Um, But even within this episode, I feel like if that is what they started doing, they gave up on it halfway through.
Yeah, because he was never really involved with any of the proper investigating, and you would expect the sidekick to have some involvement in actually trying to root out the mystery, and he just wasn't anywhere to be seen.
He just wasn't, and he also really wasn't the person that she explained the mystery to, right?
No.
So yeah, I kind of didn't really see the point of those two characters, other as a transition. Okay,
Right.
here's the introduction. We move on. Whereas the publisher himself is very important, mainly in the beginning as a potential love interest.
I disagree. I don't think she ever liked him. No, I'm just fucking with you. It was a little absurd. Them trying to fall for each other in the car ride over was really quick when they were driving up to his house.
It was odd. It was rushed. And I don't think it was a relationship that ever felt deserved. And I understand eventually towards the end, I understand why they did it. But I don't think it was particularly well done. And from my point of view, as someone who's watched a lot of mystery shows and kind of knows a lot of the tropes, some of which Murder, She Wrote started, admittedly. But as soon as there was this kind of forced together love interest, I kind of already knew where it was going.
See, this is where my lack of watching as many of these investigatives, I didn't catch that. I actually thought he might be a recurring character in, though I guess that kind of, well, you already just spoiled it, that he is the murderer, but
I haven't said that at all.
You said the love interest, and you already knew what was going on.
He could have been the murdered. I've spilt no beans. You spilt the beans.
Fine, let me cook the beans. I didn't immediately register that he was going to be a main.
In
the stereotypical, he's either the murdered or the murderer, based on the immediate connection between the two. I will say though, that while they were pushed and rushed together, I was able to just suspend my disbelief on them getting together, and from that forward, like once they're actually at his house and into the party, not him refusing to prep her and say, oh, it's a costume party. Once they're into the party, it does seem to kind of from there flow a little bit naturally in their interest and getting more involved in romantically.
I agree. I just don't think there was any reason to, other than the fact that they were driving up in the car to a party, there was no reason to try and force the kind of chemistry between them before the party. It wasn't necessary. And I think that's the problem, is that they tried to rush that a little bit. And yes, okay, so we split the beans already. So as someone who has watched a lot of these, whenever a love interest seems to be forced, they're either going to be killed or be the killer. Right? Because you're bringing them in, you're trying to connect them emotionally, not only to the character, but also to the audience. So you're meant to feel that there's a connection between these two. And normally, I will say in modern TV, they've got a lot better at kind of slow burning these kind of relationships. So you're more kind of shocked when they either die or are the villain. But in these kind of earlier runs, it very much was, here's a new love interest. They're going to be dead or in jail by the end of the episode. So when it turned out that he wasn't the one who was murdered, I knew he had to be the murderer. Now, that's not because the story or the plot or anything took me there. That was purely because I picked up on
the stereotype.
And I would have loved to have been proven wrong, but as it turns out, I wasn't. The party. Let's get to the party.
Actually, I want to circle back to when she's on the interview rounds. when she's on TV with the pretentious guy and
Oh yes,
the
yes,
drivel, and she turns it right back on him
yes.
unintentionally. It was a beautiful scene that she wasn't trying to be offensive, and yet she poured him down completely, and it was
No, I
very
disagree
amusing.
with the final
Really,
comment. I think she did mean to be offensive.
her look afterwards.
Because if I
Is,
remember correctly, it's
is she feigning?
because he says something that TV is bad, right? He indicates that TV is for the brain dead masses,
Right.
and then she
People will
retorts,
consume
"But
anything.
that would be your job," something like that. I can't remember the specifics of it.
Yeah, but essentially she says that's your expertise. Then her feigned,
Yes,
was it feigned confusion for her kind of looking around after she says that?
I believe so. I think that was a sign. I think that she's smarter than she looks, and I think she's got a little bit of a temper, and I think she manages to hide it quite well. Now, whether that becomes a thing, I don't know. But no, I thought that insult was very much intended. Um, and I
And
thought
she hid behind
it was a
being a
great
lovely
slam.
grandmother.
I think so. Yeah, yeah. Like I
Fair
say,
enough.
I may have read it wrong, but no, to me, she knew what she was saying, and she knew why she knew why she said it. And I love that scene. It made me laugh actually.
Oh yeah.
That scene, I think that was good. But yeah, the whole her not fitting in, I think was also kind of nice.
That's also definitely a connection to the audience because
Yes,
most people don't live in the city, and even those who do don't always like the busyness of it. So
yes, yeah. So yeah, no, I like that a lot. And again, it was all part of the because what this pilot was what, an hour and a half, so the length of 2 episodes, 2 normal
mhm.
episodes. Um,
Well,
but I
it's only
also
about
wonder. Yeah, carry on.
it's only about 1.75 episodes if you chop out the intro music credits.
But I do wonder. Um, I wonder if they made it now, if they would bother putting in so much backstory. Um, to me, she can be the famous author right at the beginning. There doesn't need to be this whole the nephew did it angle to it. She still gets to New York. She's still invited because she's become famous. She's still gonna go on the rounds. Um, if she's already a top selling author, she would be going on the rounds anyway. Um, I guess the interesting part is that it was her first go round, and again, like you said, this kind of puts the audience in her shoes, right? Um, I would feel awkward if I was going through this.
Yeah. Well, they could have even cut out a lot of the nephew by just having her on a whim send it to a publisher and it get published with the concept of, oh, she doesn't think that much of herself anyway. But a lot of people also would identify with the, well, I'm going to try writing and just throw it out there and see what happens.
Yeah,
Uh,
but again, I think the nephew had to put it in because she's humble.
yeah, but you
They
can
they
still,
they
I think you
really
can play
tried
humble.
to play the humble card, and I think if she'd sent it in even on a whim, even on a bet, like if her friends had just said just send it in anyway, I think you lose a little bit of the humble card. Um,
Well, then how do you propose she's already a best-selling author and still maintain the humbleness
because
that is needed for her character?
that's already happened, and then as she's doing the interviews, she comes across as perfectly humble, and we don't know the backstory. I don't think there's any reason to know the backstory. Um, there's no reason for her to be going through the interview, anyway, right? She can end up at that party purely as a guest of the publisher because she's a successful author.
That's a good
Um,
point.
the, all of it really is setting up the character, which I understand that they're trying. I don't know what the competition was in 1984. I think Columbo was going in 1984. Um, Matlock may have been going in 1984. Like I don't know what Murder She Wrote was commissioned as to go against. So whether they thought they had to really stress that this trying to differ her from Miss Marple, maybe, in that she is an old woman, but she's not Miss Marple. She is humble. She is salt of the earth. I think they really tried to hit you in the face with the she is salt of the earth, right? And like I said, I can kind of understand it, but I think from a kind of modern audience, you probably wouldn't do it. You would go straight in at the party and straight into the mystery, and you would try and layer her character in how she solves the crime at the party.
Yeah, and even at the party, one of the steps where she helps clean that person's dress, that also instills that salt of the earth vibe.
Salt of the earth. She's your grandmother, right? That's exactly what your grandmother would have done. And yes,
she says like humor the Yank or whatever.
Yeah.
Let me do my old wives' tale way of doing it, and that actually really does communicate pretty well. And it looks like it was 15 minutes in before they're in the car ride to go to his party. So he's got a damn fair point on how long that.
And I think, honestly, they could have used that 15 minutes. I know the other episodes are going to be condensed to 45, but I think they could have used that 15 minutes because I think when it comes to the mystery itself,
right,
I don't think it flows particularly well.
And it would have allowed a lot more time to just. I do think you have to have the nephew's a plot device the whole way through.
Yes.
Could you have just had the nephew also, I guess? Yeah, because they actually still could have had the same basic thing of bringing them in only as basically side characters.
Yeah.
With her already arriving at
the
party.
Nephew's at the party because the girlfriend works for the publisher and he's invited as part of that, right?
And you wouldn't have to have nearly as much of him on screen not actually moving the story forward.
No. But the other thing that you would have missed, I think, is, and again, I will always counter argue myself, is the relationship she has with the conductor on the train, which is kind of a recurring bit because she constantly goes back to the train and then leaves, right? And it's quite a nice little interaction.
It's reinforcing the salt of the earth, but a lot of that also is accomplished quite well with the taxi drivers, and it could have been something similar with either a bus or a taxi, or you could have dropped the.
You could have dropped one.
Forced.
It does, and I mean the taxi one I think was the worst, the one that stood out the most to me. At least with the train driver, or the conductor, you have no idea how long she's been talking to that conductor for them to have kind of got this kind of friendly relationship, right? Especially to a point where he remembers her days afterwards. Right? Which is a little bit. Whereas the taxi driver goes from being we're jumping all over the place, but that's fine. We assume people have watched this episode. The taxi driver.
Pause now and go watch it. It's only an hour and 33 minutes, and you can skip all 2.5 minutes of the intro music.
No, the intro music's when you make your cup of tea, have a sandwich. But yeah, the taxi driver, because he goes from being this really grumpy, typical New York taxi driver, right? Very stereotypical, to eating out of the palm of her hand in a very short taxi drive.
Yeah.
Apparently to do with some kind of cream that he can put on I can't remember what part of his body was itching. None of that was well explained. It was his feet, that's right. And she had an old country remedy for it.
And so did his father also had the issue with the feet. Well, yes. So I'm thinking, scrap all the time, because if you go ahead and make her a famous publisher, you could have scrapped the time with her at this train station and just done that via. It would leave more time to develop a thing with the taxi driver. Also, the bus scene and the attempted mugging. How did that move the story? That was.
We'll loop back to that because I found that a very weird scene, almost in its entirety, and also to the point that you mentioned in that how did it move the story forward? Because I think I understand how it was meant to move the story forward, but I don't think it landed. But let's go back
Really?
So they're at the party.
Mhm.
They've already established that the planes do sonic booms overhead, right? And they
Correct.
do them fairly often. And that is important because party's going on. He's playing his piano music, blah, 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 blah. Somebody is killed during those hours, right? Well, it's whoever's dressed as Sherlock Holmes, but there's a little bit of attempt at misdirection, shall we say? But so let's get to that. So before the murder, we're introduced to the PI, right?
Right.
Who is going through people's rooms looking for something, and he gets caught. And there's this very odd scene in the office with the love interest, who's I cannot remember his name, Jessica Fletcher, and I think there's a couple of other people in there as well, possibly the nephew who caught him,
And the girlfriend.
and the
I think
girlfriend,
that's actually it.
and then there's this very weird conversation. Okay, so he's got blackmail material on somebody at that party, and that's what we're left to, because that leaves the mystery, that leaves it open, as there are many people who may have wanted to kill this person. And at the same time, they're also detailing the Captain Birdseye, forgotten his name, not Captain Birdseye, but is essentially his character. He is a head of a fishing company.
Yeah.
And
Fast
he is
food
also
fish.
being shown not to be well liked. And you were given plenty of people who would like to murder him as well. Right? And they set up these two victims quite well, but the captain is set up a lot better. Right? The blackmail I get, it's a good motive. The captain being a little bit of he's being painted as an adultering, mean, horrible person. So if he did get murdered, there are plenty of people there. What I don't like, and again, we're approaching this that people have already watched the episode. In that scene in the office when the PI leaves and he talks about Lady Justice, Blind Justice, and guesses the costume of the love interest as the Count of Monte Cristo. That is meant to be a big plot point, right?
Yeah, and that's one of the problems they ran into, is because I had no idea what the relation was there. As you know, this show will probably make me more cultured, but
the trouble is, so to me, a good mystery, it doesn't matter if it's a book or if it's a show or if it's a game or whatever it is, a good mystery / puzzle has all the information you need within the sphere of the entertainment itself, right? You shouldn't have to bring in any outside knowledge. Now, it's an interesting nod to the kind of, okay, so the people who know about someone who has escaped from prison and has started a new life. It's interesting. I don't think anyone would have made that leap, regardless. It was such a throwaway comment. There was no indication that the love interest had a weird backstory, history. No indication whatsoever of that. And I don't think there was any indication of that in the entire episode.
right. It never plays back to that statement. His name's Preston Giles.
Okay, I will be referring to him as love interest.
Fair enough.
But thank you. Did you feel that it like you said, I mean, you were unaware of who the Count of Monte Cristo was, which is fair enough. So that scene must have just, I mean, it felt throwaway to me.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say any like the camera angles or the music, or they didn't try to do anything that you would normally do from a TV show to kind of indicate to people that it was important, which part of me liked, but
He didn't even mention Lady Justice. Literally, the only comment he made is looks like the Count of, or that his costume is the Count of Monte Cristo, and they just did a low shot from Lady Justice looking up at him.
yeah,
So
he
so
notices
fast and so quick.
Yeah, he notices Lady Justice, and then, but yeah, like I don't think at any other time was the love interest backstory, that he's just a publisher, he runs a publishing company, I don't think that was ever challenged once in the episode.
Yeah, they definitely don't put that anywhere that you would ever guess beforehand. There wasn't, to me, any serious indication that he's anything other than a rich guy.
Yeah.
That likes hosting parties.
Yeah. And then, so they spend basically the rest of the episode. So Sherlock Holmes is dead. Sherlock Holmes was the costume that's been worn by the captain. So when the body is first discovered, you're meant to believe that the captain is dead. He's been shot in the face with a shotgun. The sonic boom and the sound of the party is the excuse given for why no one heard the shots. Again, I believe that was very weak in and of itself, but kind of threw that criticism away. I think you would know the difference between a sonic boom and a shotgun going off.
Especially that close.
And I think a shotgun would easily go over the noise of someone playing a piano and people singing along.
Right. But
I may be wrong there.
Quite far from the house.
But I don't think it was.
Well,
from where they were, I know they say it was, but when they go back right at the end and explain the mystery, it seems like it's like 20 steps from the room they were in.
I have a small feeling that might have just been a set limitation rather
than... Maybe.
Because, I saw that too.
But, so they introduce that. And then essentially the rest of the episode is... So we find out that the captain isn't dead because he turns back up.
Mm-hmm.
And then this is where it gets odd to me. So, you've got a lot of police involved, a lot of different police. You've got the detective who I think was somebody fairly famous because I recognize his face.
Yeah.
But he was 84 famous, not 2024 famous. I think he was in one of the Superman movies as Lex Luthor's henchman. But Ned Beatty, that sounds about right, yes. Again, very much to me a throwaway character.
Really? I kind of liked him.
Oh no, I liked him, but he didn't seem to serve any purpose. At least not a purpose that ran across the entire episode. So, because I believe, Jessica Fletcher first gets involved because there is or there isn't a shoe print somewhere, right?
Right.
So you go through that for me. So
when the investigator, or the sheriff, I think is what he is in the show, he's in the room interviewing all the guests that are potential suspects. Meanwhile, she's outside walking around, and honestly, one has to question why she isn't also there in the room having the conversation about who was murdered. And he honestly just gets distracted, and then he does help push the narrative forward of she just sees all the details. It's not even like, obviously we have the genius trope, but the attention to detail is what showed off to me in that scene, and it does help move her character along. But for the rest of the episode, does he actually?
I think he is the one who arrests the nephew.
Yeah.
But then the case has moved on to a different police force when they discover the second body in the captain's.
I think they tried to move it on almost immediately after the nephew was released.
Who was dead in the boat?
That would have been the fishmonger / fast food chain mogul.
So it was the captain who died?
Yes, Captain McCollum. Did his face looked really familiar, and I actually, so much so that I ended up Googling him, but he does not have a history.
Dear. Yeah, no, it wasn't a face I recognized. The only other face I recognized was Andy Garcia, but that goes back to the bus / mugging scene. So, because yes, again, I did watch it, but I watched it a week ago, so my my memory is a little bit fuzzy on certain bits of this episode. Why are they on the boat when they find the body? Is it just the police on the boat?
Hey, let's see.
Because I know
There's the
Jessica
police
Fletcher
officer.
goes out to the boat at one point to confront him, right?
Yeah.
Because that's what that the taxi takes her out there. To talk to the captain.
And she gets. Oh, okay. So the sheriff and the local cops uh, get a call, an anonymous tip that they should go check out McCallum's boat, the
Okay.
captain's boat.
Yeah.
And thinking about that in retrospect, I guess that was just the love interest actually intentionally revealing another murder just to try to throw the suspicion off that it was the investigator that he deliberately killed. But that was also a
That's
really
right.
weak argument.
That's right. That was part, and that was where they I think they tried to open up. And like you said, they tried to open up and put it onto the love interest because he's one of the few people who knew that there was confusion about who the victim was or if they'd killed the right person.
Right.
And one of the big stories that goes through it is the fact that, okay, they killed the PI, but did they mean to kill the PI? Did they mean to kill the captain? So when the captain ends up dead, you assume that the PI is collateral damage.
Right.
Just happened to be wearing the wrong costume at the wrong time. So we then get to the whole money laundering, money fraud scheme that the woman and the guy who plays the piano are running.
Yes.
I believe they were either selling buildings without his permission or something.
They were revealing where he was planning on buying things, buying new properties, so that it could be bought out first and jacked up the price. Or maybe he was just running a shell company and they revealed that it's a shell company and therefore we can charge him way more because he thinks these are the right locations. It's almost the McDonald's trope of where's the perfect location to open a new McDonald's.
And they were taking the money because that's how he funded his musical, which again becomes an important plot device. And the scene where they break into the office, the nephew and Jessica Fletcher, I really enjoyed.
Tell me more.
What I liked about it is it's very tropey. It's very standard now. But I enjoyed the fact that one, she was willing to break into the office. She's got an idea. She's got something nagging her, and she needs to work out the answer.
Right.
It made the nephew look even more wimpier than he was. And at this stage, she's driven by the fact that he is under arrest or has been under arrest and is now a suspect in these crimes. Primary right. Suspect. So her impetus has now changed from being kind of attached to it because she was at a party, but doesn't really give that much interest to it. It's a puzzle to solve, but not one she is really interested in. So, oh no, hang on, I now need to clear my nephew's name. So I'm now very interested in it, and I'm going to go to more extreme lengths. I liked the fact that they brought the nephew in to explain why she would break into an office like that, because I don't think it would have made sense if it had remained this kind of not really attached thing to her. But there was some, all the bits you expect from a scene like that. So obviously she goes into the office, and then obviously the woman who they're trying to find the information from comes into the office as well. And then there's kind of the comedy where she hides behind the door and is saved by the fact that the phone rings. Which then I enjoyed it. I thought it was well choreographed. Again, I thought there was comedy in Angela Lansbury's physicality, in her movement. She's got a very expressive face when it comes to these things. And I think it, one, it introduced the fact that she will go to any length to protect someone she loves, which again, I think is a very important character trait that people can kind of grab onto.
Right.
And, that she is, she is an old woman. And yeah, I just found a lot of warmth in that scene. Even if, again, it kind of didn't really move things along. Um,
I
I mean,
guess I just didn't enjoy the physical comedy of her trying to get out of the way. Her facial expressions were fantastic. Don't get me wrong. It just, I don't know. When things are that campy, I like them to be a little bit tongue in cheek, and that scene was played so straight that, at least to me, that it was just another stereotype.
I think this is like an age thing. I think
Right.
it was played at the time. I think it was played perfectly. Yes.
Yeah. Now it's a stereotype.
Yeah,
Far more than it was.
I will compare it to Starsky and Hutch as was, and how they camped up the Starsky and Hutch movie with Owen Wilson and Ben Stiller. I think it was right. To me, um, okay, bad example, but
We're going to learn through this podcast that I am profoundly uncultured.
bad example. Yeah, but I think if they did it now, they would either turn the campiness and the tongue in cheekness up to 11,
Mm-hmm.
or they would take it deathly seriously, and Jessica Fletcher would be a 20-year-old, very attractive woman. I don't think you would find much in the divide there. But no, I enjoyed that scene. And then that leads directly onto the bus scene, which was interesting. She was willing to leave her nephew in the building to follow a lead, which I thought was a very interesting character development.
But didn't he stop at a computer right at the elevator? I was very confused. Like, I get the go to any length, but wouldn't you also just bring the nephew? I
No,
didn't feel like it would be too out of the way.
he is either in his office or the captain's office on the computer getting the records out. So he goes a different way at the lift. He's not still by the lift. He goes to a separate office. She goes down the hall to the woman's office to find whatever paperwork she was looking for. Doesn't find anything. I will admit, one thing I quite like, because when the woman is on the phone, she obviously writes down the address of where she needs to go. Right. I was expecting them to be the old pencil on paper trick to see what was written down. I'm glad they didn't do that. I'm glad they kind of ignored that one and went for no, we're going to follow her instead. Which leads to the bus scene. And
tell me, wise one, what value was the bus scene? I'm not convinced.
I don't think there was anything good about the bus scene in any regard. So there's the weird camera angles pointing to the bus passenger, who we're clearly meant to think is evil.
Well, that's because he's black.
In some way, right? Yes, I think it was playing up to racial stereotypes. And my problem is, again, because I think it was purely the only way you can think he's evil is if it is on racial stereotype, because you've never seen that character before. You've never seen them hanging around or attached to someone. Like, you don't believe he's following Jessica Fletcher, right? Because there's nothing to ever suggest that. He's purely on the bus, and we're meant to think he's bad because of how the camera keeps on cutting to him.
It is only the camera and the fact he's the way he's presented with the camera, and it doesn't feel well crafted even with the camera cutting to him.
It doesn't.
It felt sudden.
It felt sudden and unearned, and purely to try and put you on edge. So when you see him walk to the back of the bus to get out when Jessica Fletcher gets off, you're expecting something bad to happen, right? You know he's got off the bus. Okay, they don't show him directly getting off the bus, but you know he's got off the bus. Right? You know he's done. He's moved, so he's obviously got off the bus. They then do a kind of 180, catch you off your guard. Two white guys then mug her instead. One of which was Andy Garcia. And the guy from the bus saves her. Right?
Right.
To me, that whole scene was pointless. Right? And at the time, I didn't understand the point of that scene. The point of that scene was her working out that the woman was going to the theater where the man was producing his off Broadway musical. Right?
Right.
Somewhere in that scene was meant to be the clue that you put those two things together. I did not. I do vaguely remember, I think at one point there is a shot of some posters on a wall, which may have had to do with theatre stuff.
I thought so. There was a shot of her book, and it was actually a picture of her posted up like a movie poster that had been defaced. Uh, I don't remember seeing any production stuff, but it's still.
Yes, nor do I. So when they make the leap when she's explaining herself afterwards, when she catches them both, and it's explained that that is completely a red herring, and has got nothing to do with what's going on. That's how she explains that she knew she was going to meet the music guy because that's where he was doing his musical. And to me, that didn't follow.
Yeah.
Right.
And what did the mugging have to do with that? She could have got.
Absolutely nothing. I think they were just trying to show that it was a bad part of town and that somehow you were meant to put it together that was, I think it was meant to be on 7th Street or something like that.
17th.
So I don't know if that was meant to, if they were playing to New York stereotypes at the time. Maybe 17th Street was well known for people being mugged. I don't know. I can't remember, but I don't remember seeing when the bus stops any kind of, even a kind of side shot to like a street number or name. Like, I don't think you're on 17th Street at any point during that. And no, I don't think that scene to me stood out as something that didn't need to happen at all. If the clue she was trying to work out was that it was on 17th Street, they could have done the paper and pencil scrubbing thing and she could have just got part of an address, right? 17th Street. And then she puts that together. That to me would have made more sense than what they actually did. But yes, the whole point of that scene was, I don't know, one, to fight racial stereotypes, maybe. Get the black audience in. I don't know. I mean, being very mean in my thinking there, but it also would not surprise me.
Given how far back this is, that very well could have been something they were attempting to do.
So far back, this could have been made yesterday, and that's something they would try and do. Don't try and think that Hollywood has moved on or the TV industry has moved on from 1984 because it hasn't. But that's not what this podcast is about.
They would have been less blatant with it. They would actually build the person into the story. Hollywood
maybe.
Definitely is happy to have its token characters, but this was just.
But no, I think you could have got rid of that scene completely. And again, I think you could have brought some more time to actually try and put into the episode doubt about the love interest and why he would be murdering these people.
Right.
You get the idea that he might have something he's hiding based on the blackmail comment, but that is also aimed at everybody in the party, not just at him.
Right.
Okay, he reacts to it, but he's the only one who can because he's the only one who's in the room when that comment is made, right? So I think they could have got, if they trimmed the start, if they trimmed a little bit of the bus stuff and actually tried to play with this guy, this very odd guy.
Yeah.
One scene that I really didn't like is when I think they've driven her back. He's driven her back. And there's this scene in the car where he gets fairly desperate. I won't say aggressive, but he gets fairly desperate and kind of just like blurts out all his feelings. As far as I can tell, for no other reason than to, if anybody hadn't caught on the fact that this was a love interest, that he is in fact a love interest. And again, that seemed very unearned to me. And I think that's my biggest problem with this initial episode is, and we got to start getting to the end and our final thoughts. Whereas this episode, our podcast episode is going to be longer than the actual episode of Murder, She Wrote. Is a lot of it felt rushed. A lot of it felt unearned. And the mystery itself, I don't think flows through the episode.
No.
I think the final revelation, like I said, I guessed he was the murderer purely based on tropes, right? So when it turned out that he was the murderer, I was not surprised. The reason why, and then them explaining how we as an audience were meant to put it together, which is how Jessica Fletcher put it together, I thought were odd to say the least. The scene when she's on the train and she realizes that the New York Times person who talks to authors is a woman, not a man, or the other way around, which is the
Yeah.
final light bulb moment where she works it out, I thought was quite clever. Because we have been told that, I can't remember which way it goes, but we were told that they were a man, and turns out they were a woman. And as a final light bulb moment, I will admit when she had it, I didn't get it. It's not something that necessarily flowed to me when she was reading that piece of paper. Probably because I didn't actually look at the piece of paper, because I'm so used to modern TV where they would have been reading that out loud, rather than me having to actually look for clues. But
I paused it and rewound to try and figure out what the clue was there, and still couldn't
okay.
get it.
So I thought that was at least interesting. But then the whole he had another life and was in fact a prisoner on the lam just came out of nowhere.
Right.
Right?
But a separate question of curiosity. So it said that he shot the investigator and then dressed the investigator up as Sherlock Holmes.
Yes.
Who the hell would because to me that also you could have used that to develop the story of suspicion around him,
Yes.
of ulterior motives, and because he would potentially have some blood on him,
Well, he would have definitely had blood on him. He'd shot somebody's face clean off.
Exactly.
Right?
And
oh, that was the other thing that I thought was odd, and again was meant to be a light bulb moment that I didn't get, and it was a literal light bulb moment about the fact the lights came on automatically.
I will say I did find that one clever. I did quite enjoy that. I don't know why his lights would then get, because they come on at 8, but wouldn't they just stay on all night rather than going off at midnight?
They do stay on all night. That was the whole point.
No, they turn off at midnight, but he was killed at 11.
Oh, okay.
15.
Well, no, midnight makes sense, right? You're probably going to be in bed by midnight. You don't want to waste all your electric on lights.
How much money does he have?
Yeah, but you stay rich by not spending your money. But I can, but no, it was to me, it was an interesting plot point. The fact that, okay, it can't have been mistaken identity because the lights are on, so you knew exactly who you were killing.
Right.
But yes, I enjoyed the episode. I will say that. And as a pilot, I honestly think it was a very strong pilot.
Yes. I was surprised by how much I enjoyed some of the tongue-in-cheek and campiness to it. I will say, personally, I have a strong disagreement with her comment on whether or not the captain. She said never murder, and I'm sorry. There are crimes that are there's fates worse than death, and therefore there's crimes worse than murder. And it sounds like he was pretty. From what he's saying, it sounds like he would happily do backroom deals and, pull a Nestle and steal.
Oh
water.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
So.
Yeah. But
I'm not sad to see him go.
No. And obviously the star is meant to be Jessica Fletcher, and right. I think that was good because as a character, I'm intrigued. And I did like the fact that they left a little cliffhanger about these wrestlers who had died in some kind of weird way. Had they drowned? Yeah.
One drowned. And the other, it was either but it was, and they found them in the wrestling ring.
Yeah. But I love that final scene on the train where she's ready to go. She's going home. She's done with it. And then the nugget drops and she kind of just comes back off the train and goes, drowned? I love that. I thought that was such a good way to end it.
And it kind of shows her developing from writing her own book and dealing with New York. And then she gets involved in a puzzle. She gets to the end of it.
Yeah.
And it kind of the thrill, the intrigue, the interest, she transitioned. It shows that she has, to some extent, transitioned to her curiosity is more than her desire to just go back to nowhere.
Yes. And I think that to me was the important part of the growth, because until she said that, another episode to me wouldn't have made much sense.
Right.
She'd got wrapped up in a crime once. It's very unlikely she's going to get wrapped up in a crime again. It wouldn't make sense for her to be involved in one. But no, here is crime, a more
So
public
absurd.
crime, so absurd that of course it's going to pique your interest. And that made sense to me.
It was a little weak to me that the cops were asking for her help, because I don't feel they
Yes.
resolved the main plot line well enough to have the cops trust her that much. And also, they don't really ever resolve anything with the love interest and getting arrested. Like, just his admission, and then it fades to her leaving the city. I I feel like there should have been a little bit more resolution, because that would have also then given the strength to the cops reaching out to her.
Yes. Well, kind of, but not really, because does he not confess to the local sheriff cops, not the New York City cops?
Uh, I'd have to jump back through the episode. I don't think so. I just watched it yesterday. I will admit that the first time I started watching this and didn't make it all the way through,
Yeah.
I was drunk, very, very drunk. So I might have enjoyed the campiness just a little bit more than. No,
Dear.
I just watched the section. It's immediately from or him confessing and her leaning back against him, her trying to get on the train with the train conductor.
Yeah.
Conversation.
And again, I think and it'll be interesting to see when we watch the first non-pilot episode how much they've tried to drop, right? I feel they tried to do too much in this episode. I feel they tried to be too clever. And part of that is to try and make you go back to the next one, right? You're trying to sell your series, not only to people watching, but you're trying to sell it to the execs, right? This is going to be a series worth picking up, worth making. And I feel they overcomplicated it and then simplified some of the explanations a little bit too much. I feel the mystery wasn't really that work outable. I don't believe you could ever get ahead of Jessica Fletcher. She was always slightly ahead of you. And they really had to explain it at the end. Like that whole scene at the end when they're by the pool where she's having to explain it.
Mm-hmm.
Very Agatha Christie detective at the end explaining it, but obviously they're not all in the room. But it felt out of place in a way. And I feel like they had to put it on so it actually all made sense.
Yeah, well, and that's the frustration with so many of these other scenes and sections taking up so much time. And it also curiosity to whether or not execs would have liked it. Wouldn't they have seen just so much filler? And the reason you would watch this is the intrigue, the mystery, the puzzle. And while all that was there, so much time was spent on, for example, the bus insert scene.
Yeah.
And even.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think overall the episode is a bit of a mess.
Yeah.
And honestly, I think you take Angela Lansbury out of it and put anybody else in as Jessica Fletcher, and I don't think you've got yourself a show.
No.
Obviously, there will be other people who could have done it in a different way and made it compelling, but I really think Angela Lansbury brought a lot to the character of Jessica Fletcher and a lot to what makes it watchable.
Yes.
And if you were watching it just for the intrigue, now again, you have to remember this is in the 1980s, and your average TV exec would have thought your average viewer was an idiot.
Well, that's fair, but if your average viewer's an idiot, you should give them a few more breadcrumbs so that they can feel like they're involved in the intrigue rather than.
I don't know how modern a thing that is. And obviously, it's something I can't comment on. Is we watch a mystery. Well, I mean, a lot of them, especially the procedurals, they're very much you can't work it out because you're just going along for the ride, and you're going from clue A to clue B to clue C to clue D, and clue D gets you to the end, and there's actually no real thought given to it.
Right.
But this. I have a feeling that, and you may not have watched this, and again, I don't want to go into this because we got to wrap up. But
sorry,
Knives Out is probably roughly around the same length as this, maybe a little bit longer. Has a much more compelling mystery, and all the clues are there.
Yes, and it's Knives Out was a absolutely lovely film, except
Yes.
for he couldn't stick to just one Southern accent. He would in one sentence change between Arkansas to Appalachia to Louisiana.
Oh
No,
dear.
no.
But that's not what we're here to discuss. But no, I
Still,
enjoyed it. I'm very much looking forward to watching the first proper episode. You know, because it's going to be down to 45 minutes. It's going to be interesting to see what it is they drop. They don't have to reintroduce the character of Jessica Fletcher, hopefully. What about you? How do you feel about
one
the
of
episode?
one of the curiosities I always have with the pilot to the actual show is how many of the characters are actually going to stick around. Because I have a feeling that besides Angela Lansbury, we're never going to see any of these people again. I kind of enjoyed the love interest and his presence on screen, but obviously with him as the murderer, he's never going to return. But
Yeah, I mean, you apart from how they were treated in the episode, you would have thought they would try to have made more of the sheriff detective as either a friend or a foil to Jessica Fletcher doing what she's doing, right, or even as a kind of mentor, right, into the kind of the way, like the police procedure part of it, which is something they don't really go into, which I kind of like and kind of don't. The nephew is definitely someone who can pop back up every now and again, you know,
like that.
But yeah, the only character they were developing was Jessica Fletcher. And that's the only one I would expect to see again.
That always makes me slightly sad. If you're going to build a pilot, yeah, a lot of the characters weren't nearly as fleshed out as Jessica Fletcher, but
yeah,
it's kind of tragic that they wouldn't try to also build at least one or two. Like the sheriff could have been a great one to keep throughout the show, and the nephew's probably going to come back, but we can also almost guarantee his love interest is gone, which kind of then makes him more hollow, and he's only going to come in for snippets to instigate a storyline.
There might be a wedding episode. There might be a wedding episode
with actually still that same
person. Whether or not it's the same actress, who knows? But same character. And a wedding episode, it's a good reason to get a lot of people in a room and someone gets murdered.
I don't like when they also then get a new actor to fill the spot. But that's
yeah, I mean, that's just things that are going to happen. But yeah, overall, I enjoyed it. Part of me was worried, like, because obviously I'd made a joke that we should do this, and then we actually did it. And part of me was very worried that I was going to watch the pilot and go, "This is a terrible idea," because there are 264 episodes.
my thought process, even if the pilot's terrible, if we can make it through season 1 and we still don't find anything that keeps us intrigued.
264 episodes.
And 4 movies?
Maybe. Let's not worry about those. 264 episodes is what we've now committed to watch.
Yeah, unless we give up, or we can always watch Knives Out.
Only after we've watched our 260 something episodes.
So I just in File Explorer clicked and investigated. I show 268 total files that I downloaded.
Yeah, so you've probably
which
got
includes
the
the 4 movies.
Yeah.
Yeah, but so that would be 264.
Yes.
Which is more than what you said.
Didn't I say 264?
I wasn't listening.
Well, anyway, 263 more anyway is what we've got to watch. I believe it's 264, including the pilot. And I was worried because obviously I remember watching a few episodes, every weekend or so, whenever it was on. But like never committed to watching them, never seeing if there's any kind of through story or this kind of stuff.
Right.
And I was like, is this going to be a terrible idea? But no, I actually enjoyed the episode more than I thought I would.
I am intrigued to watch the next one.
Yes, as am I. So I think that means we will be back. This won't be a one-time thing. There will be an episode 2 of this podcast, which I think leads us to a very interesting question. What are we calling this thing?
Teterboro.
I don't think that makes any sense.
No, see, the love interest had to get a plane chartered at Teterboro, and for my personal life, I know if you hear
That is a
someone mention
deep cut.
Teterboro,
That
if you
is
hear
a
someone mention
deep cut
Teterboro
for a title.
in my city, you know where they work.
Someone just sees that come up randomly on a YouTube recommendation or a podcast. They're gonna, what is this? This is a Murder She Wrote podcast? Come on now.
I'm not good with names. We
Deep cut. Deep cut. Call it Dave. I mean, well, I was going for more simple fare. So Murder They Watched was something I had. I actually can't think of the others I came up with at this moment in time. But
yeah, I never even thought about this. So
the trouble is it doesn't have a name. I don't know if anyone's going to watch this one, but if you do and you can think of a good name, put it down in the comments, because this is only going to appear on YouTube because I need a name before we can put it out as a podcast. And we don't have a name yet. We will name it that to start with on YouTube.
No.
But I'm going to call that's the episode name.
Okay,
that's what I'm going to call this episode. All right. No one's going to understand it, but it doesn't matter. But yes, we need a name for this thing. So if you can think of a name, please let us know. And if you have any comments about the kind of, do we need to be more structured? I'm not a huge structure person. I just like to talk about things. But if you feel we need to be more structured, we can try and put more structure in.
Murder They Pod?
Murder They Pod? Sounds more like we're killing dolphins, but
yeah,
we could do.
Someone more creative in the comments, please help.
We need help. We need help. Not just on this. We just need help. If you're willing to help, we need help. Oh dear. But anyway, any final thoughts, final comments, Nate?
I'm just waiting for you to say goodbye so I can say hello, just to cap off.
Well, now you've ruined the joke. Now you've ruined the joke.
I ruin every joke.
That is a bullet you should have kept to yourself right there. No. I think I'm just going to end it like that. Just no.
Nope.
We're done. No. Maybe there won't be another episode. You ruined the joke. I'm off the whole thing now. I'm done. No.
I think I'm hilarious.
But anyway, thank you for anybody who watched this. Like I say, leave a title suggestion down below. Any other comments would be welcome. I'm PoliceofCake. The other guy's Nightbringar. Goodbye.
Hello.
I paused so long and then you delivered that so poorly. I'm disappointed. And it's just going to end with me doing this weird. It's not, because I have to press a button. I have to move my hand. Bye, everybody.